If you're a franchisee that loves your team, but is exhausted from being the only person that is attracting leads and converting those leads into customers, let me tell you, you're not alone. Today, I'm going to share with you the number one myth that's holding your team back from driving revenue for you, how to shift your employees into revenue producing mode in a single day, and what your life looks like when you feel fully supported by those that you employ. I'm April Porter. Let's get into it. The number one myth in franchising is that no one cares about your business as much as you do. I will never forget when my franchisor told me this. I believe it was at training camp before I actually opened my doors. And it was repeated over and over again. No one will ever care about your business as much as you do. And I believed it, and it was programmed into me to believe it. And we were being taught to be operators of the business, to get in, to understand the day to day, and to find the customers, to get the leads coming through the door, to make the sales, and to drive that revenue. In fact, in my brand, we were told that the best pathway forward was to be the only employee in the business so that you could reserve your capital by not having to make payroll for others. And then you worked in the business as that sole employee until you were profitable. And then once profitable or cash flow positive, then you could then hire your first employees. And so that's what I did. And it took me 3 months to get to that point, which in the small business world is a very short amount of time. But let me tell you, it didn't feel like a short amount of time. See, I was in kickboxing gyms for those of you that are just tuning in, and we opened at 8 a.m. in the morning. We closed at 8 p.m. at night, and there was a 2-hour window during the day where we were closed and on a break. Now, in our model, we provided personal training to each and every customer that walked through the door, and we could have 9 customers at a time, all doing different things in our gym. And so what that meant is that I was demonstrating, 27 different exercises every 3.5 minutes all day long from 8 in the morning until 8 in the afternoon. Yes, I got a 2-hour break. And during that 2-hour break, I ate lunch and I went out and did marketing, guerrilla marketing. So it was really nonstop. And I was the most exhausted I've ever been in my life. So if you're a franchisee, you might be able to relate to this. Maybe it's a different industry, but maybe you dove in head first and you said, I will do whatever it takes to get my business to where it needs to be so that I can hire employees, just like we did. And then when we hired our first employees, the mistake was I kept doing the same thing. I was still working all those hours. And that's because I was the only person that was driving the revenue. I was doing the marketing. I was pulling the customers in. I was making sure I was there when they had their free trial workout. I was selling the memberships and getting them converted because I was the best salesperson in the gym. And so if I allowed my team to do those things, often I would see that we would miss a sale. And I would think, man, if I'd been there, I could have converted that person to a paying customer. And so it started to reinforce that idea that no one would care about my business as much as I did. And in order to get my business to work, I had to be involved in it every minute of the day. And of course, when people are telling you this, people that have more experience than you, like your franchisor, you want to do what they tell you to do because you've been told that that is the blueprint to being successful. It was only later that I learned that this was a myth. Once I had my executive coach, and I got an executive coach. If you've tuned in at all, you've heard the story of the moment that was the big wake up call for me that made me go out and get an executive coach. And when I did, I learned that that's not how business is supposed to work. In fact, if you hire the right team, you instill the right culture, and you provide them the right training and development, then your team not only cares just as much as you do, but they actually become more talented than you are at driving the revenue. You do this by creating passionate followers. That's the first step. You have to turn employees into passionate followers. What are passionate followers? Well, those are employees that adopt your mission, the reason that you're in business. They adopt it as their own. They believe in the why behind owning the business and running the business and impacting the community and the customers. And they feel driven to achieve it as if it was their own mission. Those two things have to exist. Passionate followers are employees that adopt your mission and feel driven to achieve it. Now, how do we get them to do that? Well, it's not just one thing, unfortunately, but I am going to share with you the first and most important step to take, and that is to host a MECAMAID day. What is MECAMAID? Well, first you have to know how it's spelled. It's MECAMAID, and it stands for My Employees Care as Much as I Do. MECAMAID is something that you have to believe before you see it. And that's where most business owners go wrong, because we're fed the myth that our employees don't care as much as we do. We're always looking for our employees to prove that they do care as much as we do before we will trust them and before we will turn over things to them. That's one of the reasons we have such a hard time delegating. But with MECAMAID, you actually have to believe that your employees care as much as you do before you're going to begin to see that they care as much as you do, before they're going to be empowered enough to take the appropriate steps to begin driving the revenue and moving your business to your goals. So what is a MECAMAID day? Well, a MECAMAID day is an all-day, all-team meeting, and it's very structured and very strategic. And the number one thing that we start with during the day is to create an intentional company culture. This is the first piece of the puzzle that most business owners get wrong. I talk to so many franchisees who tell me how wonderful their team is. We're like a family. I can definitely trust my team. I get raving reviews from my customers about my team. All of those things are wonderful. But when I ask, have you created an intentional company culture? Usually the answer is, yes, we have a great company culture. That's not what I asked. Have you created an intentional company culture? See, an intentional company culture is when you actually put to paper what your culture is. You involve everyone in determining what that culture looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like for the customer, what it feels like for the employees, what it feels like for the community. It has several components, things that you may be aware of and maybe even you're aligned with that the franchisor has created, such as core values. Your brand may have core values and you may feel very aligned to them. And you may have told your team, these are our core values, adopting what the franchisor has told you. But the truth is that while you're aligned with it and while your employees are aligned with you, if you took the time to create an intentional company culture within your own franchise units and you had your team working together to figure out what your specific core values are, they probably would be different than what the brands are. They would be aligned, but they would be different. And so that one little step that's missing has really having a false sense of culture because we think it exists, but we haven't created it intentionally. So during a MECAMAID day, you do figure out what your core values are. You determine your unit's mission statement, your unit's brand purpose, your BHAG, your sandbox, like what is it that you all believe about the audience that you serve, and you work on that together as a team. Now, one of the secrets to a truly powerful MECAMAID day is that you as the owner do not lead the MECAMAID day. Why? Because when you are asking things of your team internally is wondering, what is the right answer? What does the owner of the company want to hear? What would they say? And that's not how building a culture works. We need to know what their truth is. What are the core values that they feel inside themselves that make them want to be part of your company and your mission and what you're doing for your community. If they can't be honest about what is inside of them that aligns with what is inside of you, then we can't get to a consensus that feels right for everybody inside your franchise unit. And so you have to remove the bias in doing a MECAMAID day. You have to remove that pressure that employees feel to say the right thing or do the right thing in the eyes of the owner. And that's why you need an experienced third-party facilitator to come in and run your MECAMAID day. Because with an objective voice at the front of the room, everyone's input feels equal, instead of weighted in favor of what would the owner want to say or do or hear. So once you get through the company culture piece, and that's just the stated culture, then you move into the SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis is going to be eye-opening for you as an owner. It's also going to be a great opportunity for the team to really be united in their perceptions of what's possible in the business and what's holding the business back. As they begin to identify all of the different areas in a SWOT analysis, they start to gain more and more confidence that their opinions are actually valued and that they can, in fact, make an impact in this company far beyond just being a cog in the wheel that just shows up, clocks in, does a limited number of tasks, and then clocks out at the end of the day. So this is where your team really starts to feel empowered and begins to believe that they are part of the company. The next part of the MECAMAID day is where we really identify what the company's targets are for KPIs. So we look long-term, we work backwards because we know we always start with the end in mind. You work backwards and ultimately you identify the KPIs that will take the business to the revenue goals that you have in mind and that the team has decided on together. At this point in time, the whole team has taken ownership over this plan. And you should realize by this point that people are much more driven to execute a plan that was their own or that they believe is the right course of action, they have confidence in. They're much more likely to execute it than if it's a plan that they just were told to do. If you want the full framework for multiplying the revenue drivers in your business, register for the free workshop by clicking the link in this episode description. Show up live and you'll leave with actions you can implement immediately. My team and I just finished our MECAMAID day, and we do this at least once a year. As your business grows, I recommend you do it at least twice a year. But we just finished one. We all gathered together in Nashville. We rented a big Airbnb, and the first day we were there together was our MECAMAID day. And then out of that, what we were able to develop were ownership over roles in the business and the tasks that needed to be done, deadlines by which they needed to be done by, and the results by which we would measure progress. And that all leads to our revenue goals. So once you have the clarity from your MECAMAID day, then you can really start to build strategies around that make your revenue predictable and consistent and driven by more than just you, the owner. When you can feel like you have revenue that's reliably being generated by other team members, that takes a huge burden off of your shoulders and begins to allow you to trust your team even more, which allows you and your team to dream even bigger. And that's how these things snowball. That's how I grew from 1 to 4 gyms in less than 3 years. And I'll tell you, when I first opened my first kickboxing gym, I really felt like I didn't know anything about business. Even though I was an attorney, I did not know about business. I felt very self-conscious and was looking to my franchisor to teach me how to be a business owner. And when that's not really what they taught me, I felt lost. I felt lost for the first 18 months. That's when I got the second one open. And I'll tell you, the problems that I hadn't solved yet in my first location, they just multiplied. Luckily, I had that executive coach and I began to learn some of these advanced strategies. And then as I built a steadier foundation and I added number 3 and number 4, things went really quickly and our revenue continued to climb until we doubled what the top revenue prediction was by the franchisor. Our franchisor predicted that a top gym would be doing $15,000 a month, and we were doing $30,000 a month. So that's how powerful this strategy is when you start with a MECAMAID day, and that's your foundation, and you build upon it. Because the truth is, your business doesn't need more hustle out of you. It needs more leadership. Here's your action step for the week. Ask each of your team members to share with you 5 core values the business operates on. This is how you're going to test whether you're all on the same page or if you are disconnected and just thinking that you're all on the same page. And if you want the full strategy to turn employees into passionate followers, register for the workshop by clicking the link in this episode description.